Good morning, YouTube. I'm here to put up a video as a tribute to a young friend of mine who passed away a couple of days ago. And it's not just a video, it's also a tribute, it's also a retraction. I put up a video yesterday, and someone challenged something I said in the video and said that it may not be true. So the last thing I want to do is put something out there that's not true. I certainly don't want to upset anyone unnecessarily or make them feel bad. That's absolutely the farthest thing from what should be done. I mean, there are some people I don't mind offending. There are some people who treated my friend very badly in life. He had a lot of fake friends, and he had church pastors that treated him badly, used him. But other than that, no, I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. So I'll tell you what I was told. I was told recently from someone who was in communication with the hospital where my friend was staying that he had not received a single visitor, and he had been there about a month. So this was very disturbing to me, because when you are in critical condition, or even when you're in stable condition, when you've had a gunshot wound, you need people around you. You need people to pray for you. You need to know that someone cares whether you live or die. And truthfully, the staff at the hospital needs to know. They need to know that someone cares about your future, because it affects the level of care they give you. These people are human, and frankly, they let people go sometimes. So I apologize very sincerely if I said anything that was incorrect. And I took it down. The video had, I don't know, 10 views or something. I mean, nobody watches my videos anyway, so no harm done, I think. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Travis Quinn. Travis Quinn was a young man that I knew very well. We were very, very close. He always told me that I was his best friend. He was about 30 years younger than I am. He was black. He was from Miami Gardens, which is kind of a ghetto area in North Miami. About a month ago, April 9th, about 8 p.m., I received a call from his telephone. But it wasn't Travis on the other end. It was someone saying he was a friend of Travis's. And he said Travis had been shot accidentally. And he stressed the word accidentally. He wanted to make that very clear. I asked all the intelligent questions, the things you should ask. Did you call 911? Where is he shot? So forth. And the ambulance was already on the way. So apparently they called me pretty much instantaneously. What he said was Travis wanted him to call me for prayer. So that's how close we were. He called the ambulance, he called the hospital, and then he called me. I don't know if he contacted anyone before me or not. Given the situation, I tend to doubt it. I could hear Travis in the background, and he was yelling and crying out to God, and he was saying, "Not this way, God. I don't want to go this way." He was not afraid of death. I can tell you that now. Travis was a very strong Christian, and anyone who says he was crying out because he was afraid to die is wrong. He was crying out because Travis he believed he had a destiny. And of course he did have a destiny before it was taken away from him. He was very passionate about lifting other people up, especially black people. Travis was black. I don't know if I already said that. He really wanted to be an example and a mentor. Travis was a musician and a music educator, and he worked with kids from Liberty City, which is a bad area in Miami. He had a job at a place called the African American Cultural Arts Center, and he was desperate to help all these kids that came from bad backgrounds. And it was very frustrating to him to see the things that happened to black people, especially black children, to see their lack of success. It really hurt him. He had a lot of problems because a lot of the people he dealt with were just very hard to help. He had kids who wouldn't show up. He had parents who wouldn't drive their kids to lessons, and he talked about that all the time. You know, he would call people and they'd be in bed. So these things were on his mind all the time. He would very often send me a text or something call me and tell me that someone he knew had been shot, or they had been arrested, or that someone had a baby out of wedlock. And he, you could hear the emotion in his voice. He was just torn up by this stuff. He didn't want to see black people live in misery and failure, and he wanted to be part of bringing them out of that. Now, how realistic that desire is, I leave you to judge. I believe God works on individuals, not. I don't believe God says, "Well, I'm going to fix this neighborhood or that city." That may have worked all right in biblical times, but people are too corrupt now. And what I always told Travis was, I said, if you want to help people here, do well, be successful, move out, and then come back on the weekends, because this is a toxic place. Well, anyway, I met Travis, I would say, it would have been sometime about, like at the end of 2007, maybe the beginning of 2008. I was turning back to God after a long time away, and I found a church where I felt the presence of God. And I didn't know that much about God at that time. I mean, there were some things I knew. I had had a lot of supernatural experiences and so on. But when you don't pray a lot every day, which I hadn't done for years, especially when you're not praying in tongues, which I knew I was supposed to do, you don't get much revelation, and you tend to be gullible. So I didn't realize the presence of God in that place really didn't mean that the church was a good church. It was a very toxic church. It was called Trinity Church, and it was in Miami Gardens. And the people who ran it were all about money and promoting their family. One of the members of the family became Kanye West's pastor, which I think is all I have to tell you. I mean, Kanye West, it's wonderful that he is turning back to God, but he has absolutely no business with a microphone in his hand. He should be sitting in the back row. And his wife, I mean, do I even have to say anything? He's not someone who's supposed to lead. Look at what the Bible says about the qualifications for a bishop, and then look at Kanye West. But Kanye West is wealthy, and he can bring a lot of attention to a church, to a pastor. So the people who ran this church kissed up to him, and he was typical. I remember. Well, I'll tell you what I did at this church. I was an armor bearer. An armor bearer is a person who carries things for a knight. Swords, shields, things like that. Looks after the horse. Saul had an armor bearer. It's a big concept in the Bible. And the idea was that the pastors were the knights and we were the squires. And it wasn't a very flattering position, because you didn't just pray for people. You didn't just work security, which we did. It was a security team. We wore two-way radios. And some of us carried firearms. I carried a firearm because this was in a bad area. There was a drive-by at the church down the street while I was there, and there were violent incidents in the parking lot, domestic violence and things. So we were on a security team, and we had call signs. And Travis's call sign was bass clef because he was a musician. So, well, I'll tell you what happened. What happened was I went to this church, and the pastors were very interested in finding white people who were successful to attend the place. It was like 80% Haitian. And it seemed like, my impression was, after going to this church for a while, that whenever they saw somebody who looked like he made a decent living, they would descend on that person and try to involve them in the church. And one of the things they sometimes did was they would try to get people into the armor bearers. So the pastor asked me to join, and I was very, very flattered and honored. But it's funny, because when I joined the armor bearers, they didn't seem to take me seriously, and I didn't understand why. Here's this white guy showing up, and he wants to be an armor bearer, and the feeling I got was they'd seen this before, and that maybe I didn't understand that I was not really there because the pastor wanted to honor me. I was there because he was trying to hold somebody close who might be able to attract more people like himself. That's my guess. But eventually I became a big part of the team. I watched over services, presided over the security team sometimes. And Travis was on the team too. Well, Trinity's a messed up place. As I've been saying, they're heavily influenced by megachurch pastors who teach the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel doesn't work, but the message is, give God $10 and he'll give you $1,000. Basically, you pay God for your blessings. Joel Osteen is a prosperity preacher, T.D. Jakes, Joyce Meyer, I know I'm shooting sacred cows, Kenneth Copeland, Benny Hinn. Benny Hinn sometimes turns around and says, "Oh, we shouldn't do this. This is wrong," but then he turns around and does it again. I don't know what his current position is. These people are really useless and they're poisonous. And it's especially bad when you run a church like that and you're in a poor area and you're telling people, "Don't pay your light bill, make an offering to God because He'll bring you the money." And I literally heard things like that. They were under the influence of a guy named Steve Muncie, who is a real lowlife. He has a mega church in, I think it's Indiana, and he had things. He drove his church into foreclosure. He put his home in foreclosure. The court documents said he was getting something like $72 million a year, but he had an airplane. He had a zoo. I mean, a zoo at a church. He had a Starbucks in his church. That is what I was told. And the pastors at our church wanted to imitate him. He would visit sometimes and have fundraising drives. He had this thing called the 7 Blessings of Passover that he just made up out of thin air. And the idea was that if you give God a big Passover offering, that He'll defeat your enemies, He'll bring you money, He'll heal your diseases. Of course, none of these things actually happen. I don't know why my computer's making that noise. So, it was not a good place, but it took me a while to figure that out. We had little prayer groups there, and there was a room in the back where we met. And you couldn't really speak the truth out in the sanctuary because you would make waves and, you would fall into disfavor. I didn't really care about falling into disfavor, but I didn't want to. Well, what was I going to do? I wasn't going to go up and grab the microphone out of the pastor's hand. So it really served no purpose to try to say things out in the open. Although I did say a lot of things on Facebook and so forth and Twitter. It was a Twitter message that finally set the pastors off and caused them to contact me and ask what my problem was. So there was this room in the back. A bunch of us used to get together there every week for prayer, and I would tell people things that I knew actually worked. I was learning things from God, and I told them, "You got to pray in tongues a lot every day." And I said, "You got to get rid of your iniquities. You have to get God's supernatural help to get rid of iniquity." And iniquity is an inclination. It's a sin is an act, and an iniquity is the inclination that drives you to sin. The actual word in Hebrew means crookedness. So it's like you're a spring or a stick that's bent in a certain direction. Even if you try to straighten it out, it's going to spring back and go back to its old ways. So that's what iniquity is. And sometimes these things have to do with demons. Sometimes they're caused by the flesh. And I told people we need to cast out demons. I mean, people have this idea that Christians don't have demons, and that's absolutely 100% false. Everybody has demons. Everybody. You may not think you have them, but you do. And they manifest in things like disease, mental illness, dumb ideas, really, really stupid ideas that people somehow manage to believe, even though they're obviously not true. Demons deceive people. They cause people to fail in life. They break up their marriages. They ruin their relationships. And you need to be free of them. You need to close the doors to them. You need to be rid of things like witchcraft and astrology and yoga. You should get rid of yoga. Trinity Church had a pastor named Linda, and she taught yoga in the church. Yoga is part of a demon-worshipping religion. Look it up. In India, there's no controversy about this. Everyone there knows this. But when they come to America, they know they can't call it religion, so they've turned it into exercise. But it's the same thing. When they talk about chakras and all that, that's demonic doctrine. Look it up. So I was teaching against the enemy as well as I knew, and I was teaching in favor of the Holy Spirit. And some of the people listened to me. And Travis was part of this group, and he started picking up on this. He seemed like a really unlikely candidate because Travis liked to have fun. He liked the girls. He was very socially connected. And he was a big part of the, I don't know what to call it. I mean, he was a huge promoter of the black race, and he was way out on the left politically. That was something weird about Trinity Church. This is a church where people spoke in tongues and claimed they knew the Holy Spirit, and yet they were political leftists. There's no way you can reconcile those things. It's impossible. Leftists are against God. They're against the unborn. They're against Israel. They're against the Jews. They're against decency. They're for fornication. They're for drug abuse, pride, cruelty, you name it. There's no way that you can side with them and really be in touch with the Holy Spirit. So Travis didn't look like the most likely candidate on earth, and yet he started listening. And he started praying in tongues all the time. And he started changing. his whole attitude started changing. And we drew close, and they had a commercial kitchen there. You know, Steve Muncie had a Starbucks, so they wanted to be like Steve Muncie, and they had a little cafe they put together with some commercial equipment. And I make absolutely phenomenal pizza. I'm not going to even be modest about it. So in addition to working as an armor bearer, I worked in the kitchen, and I started making pizzas, because you make a pizza for $3 and sell it for 12, and there was virtually no government oversight. So, and they didn't have to pay anybody, so it was a good deal for the church. And they needed some decent food. There were a few people there that could cook, but it wasn't a great cafe. So this is what I did, and Travis came and became my sous chef, and Travis learned how to make pizza, he learned how to make garlic rolls. We ended up being prayer partners. Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I should say, as time passed, it became very clear that I was not welcome at this church, and that the pastors would be happy if I left, and I was very happy to leave. So I left, and Travis stayed there for a while. One of the problems that Travis had was he always wanted to lift other people up after it became obvious that there was no point, that because you can't lift people up unless they reach up and put their hand in yours. It's not possible. So one of the hard lessons of Christianity, and one of the most productive lessons, is that there are people you got to cut off. And if you want to look for examples of that in the Bible, well, think about Noah. Think about Lot. Do I have to go on? Think about what Jesus said about shaking the dust off your shoes when you leave a city where they won't listen to you. Think about the things that he said to the places where he was rejected. So Travis had a hard time rejecting people, because it really hurt him to let people go. It really did. Well, it took him longer to leave than it took me. And I went to another church where the pastors there were much more open to the Holy Spirit, and there was a lot of great things that happened there, a lot of prayer, so forth. But the pastors had an unbelievable problem with pride. They had this little church in a rented room in the side of another church, and their membership was frozen at like 150. And they were doing everything wrong. They played music so loud that it would literally damage your hearing. I had to wear earplugs to church. And they were so proud, you couldn't tell them anything. You couldn't give them any type of advice. And they got into the greed thing. They would do things like, we were expected to give monetary offerings, I wouldn't say offerings, gifts, to the pastors themselves. When the pastor had a birthday, we were expected to give a gift, and he would, if he didn't like the gift, he would stand up there, and he really gave it to the volunteers once, because he didn't think the gift was big enough. And he had a son who was really messed up, and we were supposed to give his son money because his son was related to him. That was it. And his son treated older people badly, and he said he was an atheist, and he had a lot of problems that I don't want to go into, but he was not somebody who was he's not somebody you should be honoring. He needed correction. So this church was really messed up, and I did the same thing there I did at the other church. I had a social media presence then, and I would say the prosperity gospel doesn't work, and this doesn't work, and that doesn't work, and you need to give up pride and so forth, and try to be changed internally, because Christianity is about being born again, and being born again means being changed inside. It doesn't just mean you raise your hand in church and say, "Take me to heaven," and bang, you're born again. That's not the way it works. You can lose your salvation. If you think you're saved because you raised your hand in church and you asked God to save you, and then you just forgot about it, you have a very rude awakening on the way to you. You need to think about it. You're supposed to be on the team. You don't have to be perfect, but you should be on the team. So things went sour at that church. One day I woke up and I saw that the pastor's wife, who really wore the pants, had blocked me on Facebook. And I was a deacon. They blocked me out. They blocked a deacon on Facebook with no notice. And I said to myself, well, I guess I better not go to church today. And I couldn't get anywhere with that, so I just never went back again. And the church deteriorated, as I predicted, and shrunk. And eventually it was determined, the pastor was exposed. He had been raping a little girl systematically for years. And that was exposed. And he was given an opportunity to step down from his position. And I don't do whatever you do in a situation like that in the secular sense, go out and get treatment and so forth. I don't know what exactly the terms were. And he chose to go back to church and try to preach. And because of that, the little girl's mother turned him in. And he's in prison right now. He's done. That's how proud he was. So I left that church, and they really hated me. The pastors at Trinity didn't think too much of me either. They had secret meetings when I left about me. They called in people that I knew, thinking that they wouldn't tell me about it, and asked them about me. And they would say things like, "If you want to know about him, why don't you go ask him?" And they were offended. And now that I think about it, they left the church also. One of them started withholding tithes because he didn't like the way things were going. Tithing is a Jewish law thing. You don't have to tithe. You're supposed to be generous. You're supposed to give when the Holy Spirit says to give. But the tithe is a Jewish law thing. You've never been under that. So I left this church, and the pastors were just enraged. It was Travis stayed. He always wanted to make things work, wanted to help people, and he was a musician, so he played at their church. And one night when he was leaving the church, the pastor chased him in the parking lot and started screaming at him and waving his hands in his face. And Travis is a big guy. He was 5'11", 275. And he was not somebody who was going to back down. And he did not like this very much. It was so bad that someone else I know called me on the phone, even though I had left the church long ago, and asked what we should do, and should we call the police and so forth. And I didn't want Travis to get arrested for battery. And it was so bad that Travis told me later, he said that he looked at the pastor. The pastor's a big guy. The pastor's like 6'1" and 280. I mean, he was fat, but still, he was not somebody to be taken lightly. And Travis looked him in the eye and said, "If you don't get out of my face, I'm going to beat your ass." I'm sorry to use that language, but that's how bad it was. This guy was just unhinged. Well, we didn't have a church after that, a regular church. Travis went back to Trinity and played for money and did things like that. He tried to be somewhat helpful, but he wasn't deeply attached to the church anymore. And Travis was my prayer partner. He would come to my house to pray. He would get there however he could, and we had long prayer sessions. And he was the guy that I turned to. It's really an amazing thing. I was 30 years older than he was, and I was white, and I lived 15 miles away, and now I'm 300 miles away, and I was still the guy that he turned to, and he was the guy that I turned to when it became necessary to talk about the deep things of God, because I'm not dismissing other people that I knew. I have other friends that are Christians, and they're not idiots, but there were some things I could really only discuss with Travis, and we had wonderful prayer sessions. He would come to my house. Travis was not in school when I knew him. Well, not to begin with. I mean, what happened was he went to FAMU, which is a traditionally black university. And this is not something I really am in favor of. If you go to a traditionally black university, it's like you're suggesting to people that you need special help. And maybe that's true, but I'll tell you, ordinary universities give a ton of help to minority students. I mean, I've mentored some people, and I've told them there's a lot of stuff available to you. If you don't have a scholarship, there's people out there waiting to find you to give you a scholarship because of your race, and you need to get in touch with them. So I don't know. I don't know if the black universities do more, or if they have a lower standard for scholastics or what. I don't know what exactly it is, but it's a way of isolating yourself from mainstream society. It's a way of isolating yourself from contacts that aren't black. So I was not really thrilled. I'm not really thrilled with the idea of going to a traditional black university. I think it looks much better to say I went to Harvard, I went to Penn, a real university that everybody there has to compete. Well, Travis went to FAMU and he joined the marching band, and there was a scandal up there. The marching band at FAMU is a Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University. I think it's in Tallahassee. And the marching band up there has a sick culture. One of the things they do, if they can get away with it, is they beat people. They'll make you run a gauntlet, and they killed a guy. Now, they beat people till they were unconscious. Terrible things have happened up there. And they had a scandal while Travis was there. Somehow he was involved with it, and he left college. And eventually he told me that he had auditioned at the University of Miami, where the Frost School of Music is located. And he told me that, I'm not going to say I think he said he had auditioned in the past. I'm not sure. But he said he had talked to them. That's all I'm certain of. And that things looked very favorable. And I used to tell him, go over there and audition. There's minority money available for you. There are people there. I guarantee you, there are people waiting to counsel you and try to make you succeed. Go over there and see what you can do. And I didn't know if he would ever listen, but one day it was either a text message or a phone call. He got in touch with me and he said he had gone over and auditioned. And they had given him a scholarship. And at first it was a partial scholarship, then it was a full scholarship, minus room and board. I think they paid for his books, I'm not sure. So that was it. He was a trombone student, I guess you would call it, a music education student, and his instrument was trombone, his main instrument. I mean, he played 12 instruments at least, but that was the one that he really focused on. And the university was near me. I lived about 2 miles from the university. So I got to see Travis a lot after that. And one nice thing about it was he moved away from the ghetto for the most part. Now, I'll tell you, Travis was the hardest working college student I ever knew. He was surrounded by people whose parents paid all their bills and they drove, Porsches and BMWs. And I don't know what the tuition over there is now, like $30,000 a semester or a year or something. I mean, it's insane. And there are plenty of parents that had no problem paying that and paying $1,000 a month in rent for their sons and daughters. And Travis was riding this discarded bicycle, this horrible thing that someone had basically given to him because it was no good, and it had a crooked front wheel and no gears. It was like something people rode in the 60s. Had to be really humiliating because his friends were driving. And sometimes he slept in people's spare rooms. Sometimes he managed to rent a room in a place for a while. He was homeless a lot of the time. And he kept going. He never quit. Never quit. It was extremely impressive. Sometimes he had to ride 15 miles to work and 15 miles back at night on that bicycle because Miami has a terrible mass transit system. If you're out past a certain time, you can't get a bus. And musicians work late. So he really busted his hump. I mean, Travis will have my admiration forever for other reasons, but also for that. It's really something to be homeless while the other people around you, they have all their bills paid, and I don't know, it was really something to see. One of the problems that Travis had is that people can always let him down. They always let him down. Travis was there for people. He tried to help. If he had money, he would give it to them. He would share what he had. And he had so many acquaintances. I mean, if you went to his Facebook page today, you might see 4,000 people on his friend list, maybe more than that. He had Twitter followers. Everybody knew Travis. And they were always saying, I'll do this for you. You're my brother. I got your back. And then when the time came to show their cards, they were not around. And this is not 100% true. A friend of mine from the Second Church, from Trinity, we knew each other from Trinity, let him sleep in his house for a while. Somebody from New Dawn let him sleep in his house for a while. There was a pastor at Trinity, a young pastor that Travis really, really admired, and he let Travis live in his house for a while. So people let him sleep on their floor. But these people, generally, the people that Travis knew that should have helped him, the people who pretended they were his friends, the people who were of his own race, the race he was trying to help, by and large, were not there for Travis. And this is why I was his best friend. It's really sad that I had to be his best friend. I mean, it was an honor. It was a privilege. And I'm so glad. But it should not have had to happen. There should have been people around him that he knew well that would have helped him, and they just weren't around. There was someone very close to him who had a car that he himself had finished driving, and it was, it had some high miles on it and so forth, but it was basically okay. And he kept saying, I'm going to give you this car. And they would say, well, I've changed my mind. And he did this for so long. Mind you, Travis is riding around in the rain on a bicycle. And this person did this for so long that when he finally gave this vehicle to Travis, it was so far gone from neglect that it had to be scrapped. So this is what Travis was used to. And here he was, his best friend was an old white guy who wasn't related to him, who didn't live anywhere near him. Well, I lived near him when he moved down to the university area. One of the consistent things in Travis's life is that people who should have been behind him didn't do anything for him. He had an incident where, I mean, I can just tell you now, but privacy is not as important as it was when he was alive. He had a scrape with the law. And there was a certain day when everything had to be cleared up, and someone that we knew said, "Oh, don't worry about it. I got you, man. I got this under control. You're not going to have any problems." And the day came, and that guy was gone, and never explained. I mean, you can imagine how that feels. So it's really sad because he wanted to help people so much, and so few people did anything for him. What happened to Travis was that, I mean, I don't know the whole story because communication is terrible. I've been trying to get information since April 9th, and very little has come out. As soon as I found out he had been shot, the young man I was talking to apparently shot him. That's my guess. Now, that's a guess. There were only 2 people. You could tell by listening to the phone call, there were only 2 people there, and there had been an accidental shooting. So it doesn't take a genius to figure out what happened. And he hung up on me. I was trying to get information, trying to be helpful. This young man, everybody seems like a kid once you get past a certain age. He hung up. I mean, he had things to do, I guess. And I couldn't ever get in touch with him again. I would text Travis's phone, I would call Travis's phone, and that was it. Nothing was coming through. I'd say, "This is his friend. Let me know what's happening." And the night that it happened, I started a Facebook account and I think I started a Twitter account. I started an Instagram account, even though I hate social media. God told me a long time ago to get off social media, and I called it the little rapture. It was like I had been raptured away from social media, and it's wonderful. You try it yourself. You may think you're Facebooking for Jesus, but you're probably not. So I tried to find people that I knew that knew Travis, who had contacts, so they could get things moving, so they could deal with his family. You know, I sent his brother. I put things up on Travis's last Instagram status saying, "I'm praying for you and get well," and things like that. I didn't want to say Travis has been shot and he's in the hospital because I didn't want to start a panic. I thought people who knew him would pick up on this, and then these thousands of people that knew Travis would look after him. He finally got a GoFundMe page. It was either the day before he died or 2 days before he died. It was like a day or 2 before he died that the first real effort to get things going on social media took place by someone who actually had contacts. I mean, not by someone like me who knew nobody, or he had another friend who tried to get things going and who didn't know anyone. It's really strange. People came out of the woodwork and gave money, and if you look at the donations, it's $10 here, $20 there. It's people who don't have much, but there's a lot of them. So I guess they came through for him when the people who pat him on the back and tell him how wonderful he is really didn't. If those people were sincere, you go to this page and you'd see 500 here, 1,000 there, and there weren't too many of those. So communication was terrible while Travis was in the hospital, and at first it sounded good. He was able to talk on the phone, not to me, but to someone in his family, and I was told that the injury was not life-threatening. He was not killed, as far as I know, by a gunshot wound. He was killed by complications that came later. He had some kind of an infection. Before he had been shot, like a week or 2 weeks, I guess, at least, before he was shot, he had a disease that resembled coronavirus. And he told me about it and asked for prayer. I said he needed to go to the doctor, and he wouldn't go. So he had me and a bunch of friends pray for him, and the next day he got up and he said his symptoms were 80% gone, and he felt fine. He was just going to go on with life. It may be that he had a relapse. It may be that he had coronavirus. I was told that he was being tested for coronavirus, and the tests were coming up negative, but I don't think those tests are all that great. I mean, I think history has shown that they're pretty bad. The Chinese said that the tests they were using had 40 to 80% false positives, so there must be false negatives. Anyway, he had something. And I didn't hear anything for days, and I would send texts to try to get information, and I just couldn't get a response. And eventually I heard that he was suddenly in critical condition. He went from stable to critical, and they had a tube down his throat, and they had to do some kind of procedure to help him get oxygen, because oxygen wasn't getting to his brain. And it was disturbing because at first, I was praying for him all the time, and I had a group of people that I was communicating with by text message all the time. We were praying for him. And whenever I heard news, I would pass it on to them. One person did get in touch via social media after, actually 2 people tried to get in touch with me, but one of them, I guess, withdrew the message or something because I couldn't find them later. But there was a young lady, I'll just say her name, her name is Kalia, and this is somebody who was really, really good to Travis. This is a quality person. She sent me a message on Instagram trying to find out what was going on. We ended up communicating, and I was telling her how frustrating it was because I couldn't get anything done. I wanted to make sure his belongings were out of his room, the place that he was renting, so they wouldn't be stolen because it was basically on the edge of the ghetto. And I wanted to make sure that the people at the university knew what was happening. People at his job, I wanted them to know why he wasn't showing up to work. I don't have to tell you, this is just common sense. And I was 300 miles away, and I couldn't drive down to Miami. I couldn't get a hotel room. The hospital wouldn't let anyone in. I mean, if you're now, here's the thing. I was talking earlier about how I was told that he didn't have any visitors at the hospital. Someone's telling me that they wouldn't let the family in. Well, that comes as a shock to me because I know someone who looks after. I know someone who's a nurse and she manages other nurses. She's another person that's very, very close to me. She went to Trinity and she was also an armor bearer. They treated her badly, and she was away from the church. And I got her to this other church, and her relationship with God improved a great deal. And as she went from being a certified nursing assistant and looking after people who were dying, she became a nurse. And then she became a nurse in charge of other nurses, and she's got 2 kids now. And I have a godchild. I got 2 Haitian godchildren. I'm like the Haitian godfather, the white Haitian godfather. We figured that out. Anyway, she was telling me none of the things that we heard about Travis made any sense, and she was saying if you're close to someone, if you're in the immediate family, they'll put you in a gown, they'll put a mask on you, whatever. You should be able to go in and let this person know that they're not alone. But someone else is telling me that that's not the way it worked at this place where Travis was. And of course I don't know the truth because I've been shut out. Well, when I didn't hear anything, I thought if I had a relative in the hospital, I would tell people what was going on. If something went badly, I would be communicating every day with anyone who was trying to help him. So things must be going all right. And the last news I heard was good. So then we got this message later on. This young lady who got in touch with me, she got in touch with the landlord, and she worked things out with his belongings, and she got in touch with the family, and she did this and that. Made contacts at the university and got all that taken care of. She was just phenomenal. She still is. So one day, she was the one who took over the job of calling the hospital. I only spoke to the hospital once. And she said one day, out of the blue, that they were telling her that he was extremely critical. And this was just a few days ago. And I was highly disturbed based on what I had known in the past and based on the fact that no one had contacted me. So I, rounded up the prayer team, and we got to work. And we heard from her frequently and hope for the best. And then the news we got after that, they would tell her day after day, he's not worse, but he's not better. There's a law called HIPAA, which is the Health Information Portability Something Act. And it's a very troublesome law when you're close to someone but not close enough to automatically be privy to medical information. So if you're Travis's sister, you could go to the hospital and they would tell you what his condition was and let you in the room. If they were letting people in the room. But if you're just his friend, then they really limit what they say to you. Now, sometimes they violate the law, which is nice of them. Sometimes they'll say more than maybe they're legally allowed to say. And they do make allowances for people who are close, like this young lady Kalia. And she was not Travis's girlfriend or anything like that, but she was very, very close to him, and they meant a lot to her. I'll tell you the kind of things Kalia used to do. When Travis needed money, when he needed someone to help him move, when he needed transportation, I heard from Travis a lot. And I would say, what about your family? What about your friends? And the answer was always the same. So it always amazed me when people did things for Travis. And not only did she sometimes give Travis a place to stay, but Travis would show up at my house in her car that her parents had bought her. She came from a nice, stable, two-parent family, and she had a car, a nice Toyota Prius. And he would show up in the car, in this car, and he would say he was driving it for the next few days. And that just astounded me, because I'll tell you, once I helped Travis get a rented car, and about literally 4 to 5 minutes later, he drove it through a red light, and they came after me, So I was nervous about letting Travis borrow things, borrow vehicles. I mean, I had done it, but it was a scary thing to do. And she was willing to do this. And she didn't have the financial resources I did, to make up for it if there was a problem. I don't know if she did or not. Maybe she did. But she was young, so I'd be surprised. So she was really solid. She was the kind of person he needed in his life, and I used to think, boy, it'd be nice if he married her. There were a couple of young women like that. There was a young lady named Marcia who helped at the outset, helped us get connected to people, helped put things together, and she was very helpful. And she's a wonderful, young, successful young black woman in the medical field. So she was helpful. Anyway, she was getting this information and passing it on to us, and we were praying about it. So Travis, we hoped, was doing well, and for me, it was a trying time. And this is not about me. This story is not about me. I'm just trying to tell you, Travis isn't here and he can't speak for himself, and I just want to let people know that he existed and what kind of a person he was. But I'm not going to keep my own experiences out of it. For me, this was trying for a couple of reasons. For one thing, Travis was a lot like a son to me. And I'm not going to say he was like a son to me, fully like a son, because there are things that I could have done for him that I didn't do. I didn't pay his rent every month. I didn't buy him a car. Things that I would have done for a son, no doubt. But we were very, very close. Travis was my house sitter. I left Miami, poisonous, miserable place. I left Miami and moved 300 miles away, and my dad left Miami. My dad had dementia, and I had to look after him. And my dad had a big house in Miami, and for tax reasons, it seemed best to hold on to that house instead of selling it right away. So I was stuck with this house for a couple of years, and I made Travis my house sitter. So Travis moved from a place that was basically ghetto to a huge house with a pool 2 miles from the university. And I told him he was the Fresh Prince of Coral Gables. That was a joke I always used to make. So that's how close we were. He was looking after this big property for me. I always hoped that I would one day be able to point to Travis and say, Christianity works. Look at this young man. Look where he came from. Look at I'm sorry to say it, inadequate upbringing he received. Look at the terrible influence that his friends were. I mean, they were bad. They would do things like, they'd say, we've got a phony credit card operation going, and you can make this much money. Come over to this house and work with us. They try to get him to sell drugs. I mean, they were not wholesome people. Part of that is because the church, Trinity Church, was all full of hypocrites. I mean, the pastors were hypocrites, and most of the people at the church were hypocrites. I'll tell you what that church was like. This is a story I always tell people. There was a young man named Alex Nicholas. He was a young Haitian man who worked. I guess he would have been about 20 when things finally came to fruition. Alex was a musical genius. They called him Mozart, and he did a lot of free work for the church and their music ministry. They had a good music ministry. Well, Alex was a car thief, and he hung around with unsavory people. One day the cops caught him driving a Mercedes that belonged to someone else, and they handcuffed him. And Alex ran and jumped into a canal, apparently trying to get away. And some people said, they said, oh, it's a conspiracy. The Russian mafia had him killed, and the police threw him into a canal. I'm highly suspicious of that. If the police are going to kill you, they're not going to throw you into a canal in front of a bunch of people driving by, a bunch of motorists. I think he just lost his composure and jumped. I don't know why they couldn't rescue him. That's a great question. Somebody jumps into a canal and he's like 5'5" and weighs 150 pounds. Somebody ought to be able to do something. So I'll give him that. Anyway, Alex had a lot of connections. He had a lot of rich Jewish friends, and he knew a lot of people. Well, Trinity Church gave him a funeral, a memorial service, I should say. I don't know if they gave him a funeral or not. And the head pastor took an offering. And people were aghast. People texted me. People told me about this. They couldn't believe it. So that's the kind of church this was. And it's no wonder that so many people there were hypocrites. I mean, as an armor bearer, I can tell you, we had kids that were waving their arms in the air for Jesus and then having sex in the stairwells at the church. So it wasn't a good atmosphere to be in. I'm trying to remember where I'm going with this. Well, I can tell you, I guess I'm just trying to make it clear that Travis was very important to me, and I wanted to be at his wedding. I wanted to to hold his children. I told him I had room for one more godchild, and that's never going to happen, So that was the threat that I was facing, and there were other threats I was facing. One was I was not going to have this strong prayer partner anymore, and the prayer partner is important. People think marriage is important because of sex and marriage. I mean, sex and children, but marriage is important because you always have somebody next to you that you can pray with, and if that's not what your marriage is about, then you messed up. The other things are secondary. The Bible says 1 puts 1,000 to flight, and 2 put 10,000 to flight. It says if one falls down when he's alone, he has no one to help him. But if someone else is there, you can pick him up. Well, I wanted to see Travis do well, and I wanted to say one person out of all the boneheads that I have talked to, one person was not a bonehead. And I shouldn't say that. There's a number of people that have listened to me, that God has been able to use me to help in spite of my own, internal evil nature. He has managed to use me to help some people. But I really wanted to point to Travis. And I don't have kids. I don't have a wife. And anyway, it was wonderful to have him as someone I could help, and it was wonderful to have him as a prayer partner. And I was threatened with losing both of those things. And the final thing is, I have been practicing prophecy. I've gone over this very carefully, and 1 Corinthians 14 very clearly says that all people are expected to prophesy. All people that are filled with the Holy Spirit. It doesn't say some. The word all is right there. And it says it's something we're supposed to covet. We're supposed to set our hearts on the gift of prophecy and go after it. And it says it's actually even better than prayer in tongues, which fills you with revelation and changes your character and turns your life around. You've got to pray in tongues a lot. I mean, if you're not praying in tongues a couple hours a day, then you really, it's like not getting enough vitamin C. Something bad's going to happen. When you do pray in tongues, your life just smooths out. So I was trying to prophesy, and at first I kind of stumbled, and I had been afraid I was going to say stupid things, and I kept saying, God, please help me not to say anything stupid. Help me not just to say whatever my flesh wants to say. And I even had Travis pray with me about that. There's a preacher named Derek Prince, not Joseph Prince. Don't ever watch Joseph Prince, but there's a wonderful preacher named Derek Prince, and he had a YouTube video where he taught people to prophesy. And I watched that, and I said, well, I'm just going to go for it. And I started doing it, and although there were a lot of fits and starts, eventually I got to the point where I said, I'm just going to do this and let God worry about it, whether it's right or it's wrong. I'm not going to stop for fear that I'll say something wrong. I got to try. And I started doing this for very long periods, half an hour, 20 minutes, longer sometimes. I do it in the car, and I kept hearing God saying all these things that were positive, and that worried me. I shouldn't say it worried me. I will say I wasn't worried, but I was concerned. Because if you were prophesying falsely, what would you do? You wouldn't say, most people wouldn't say, I love you, I'll take care of you, I'll never let you fall. None of the things you worry about are going to come to pass. You'd say things like, well, I'm sorry, I think I'm getting sideways here. If you wanted to say things in your flesh and pretend it was prophecy, you would say things like that. You would say very positive things all the time, and you would rarely say things like you eat too much, you're lazy, you lied yesterday, you need to go fix that. So because there was so little negative content, I was concerned, but I was determined to go on with it. And I kept feeling like God was telling me in prophecy, I'm going to heal this young man. I'm going to lift him up. You don't have to worry. And then 2 days before Travis passed away, a young lady I know, she found out about Travis and called me, and we had a very long conversation. She's a wonderful, wonderful young lady. She had a bad upbringing, and she put herself through college by participating in beauty pageants. And she was full of the Holy Spirit. She's just amazing, driven. She takes care of herself. She lives on her own. She has a degree from the University of Miami. She is getting her master's degree right now and working at the same time. So she's just fantastic. I used to drive her to church. When she was at the University of Miami, her family asked if I could drive her to church because it was a long way off, and I lived close to the university, so I drove her to church for a couple of years. So I knew her fairly well. Anyway, she called, and she said that she felt that God had told her that Travis was going to be lifted up, and that it was going to be in a way that doctors could not take credit for. So we felt that was confirmation. And then a day or two later, someone texts me and says Travis didn't make it, and his brothers put up an Instagram post with his picture saying his heart is broken. And that was that. So now I was confronted with the loss of somebody I loved. I was confronted with something like losing a son. And I also had to question things that I believed about God, which is worse because I can't tell you how wonderful it was to prophesy, to lie back and hear these beautiful things and feel certain that everything I said was, well, I shouldn't be everything, but that what I was saying was generally correct. And suddenly that was torn away from me just instantly. That was gone. And I had to go back and reevaluate and try to figure out what I believed, which of the things that I believed were true and which were not. And that has been really difficult. That's like just having the ice break under you. I feel that I kind of understand what it's like when someone loses a son now, because when you have a child, you think, I'm going to go, but this person's going to go on after I leave. And whatever I invested in this person, it will be out there in the world and making a difference. And people will see that I didn't waste my existence. And now that's gone. And I'm old, I don't think I'm going to have a son anytime soon. So I feel that I understand a little bit of what they feel. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I should tell people about Travis. I shouldn't feel sorry for him, because Travis couldn't get a break in this life. People let him down. People poisoned his mind. Every time he seemed to be getting ahead, something came to knock him back. And he was praying, he was trying. This last thing was just the icing on the cake. And a lot of the time, the problems he caused. I'm not going to lie. There were things he did that got him into some trouble, and that was on him. There's no doubt about it. And some of the financial deprivation he had, he got a lot of bad advice when he was young about credit and so forth. So he had trouble getting student loans. But he was coming out of all that. He was fixing all that. Anyway, he was constantly pushed backward, even when he tried. I'll tell you something. I know a lot of black people, and a lot of the problems that happen to them are their own fault. I'm not going to sit here and whitewash it. There's no doubt about that. Anyone who says otherwise is selling something. But even when they try to do things right, they have a lot of problems. There's a lot of things that happen to them. And I'm not talking about racism. I'm just talking about things that happen out of the blue. There's a lot of bad things that happen to them, and they really need to get close to God, because something is going on. A friend of mine who's from Kenya says she believes it's the curse of Ham that was put on because Ham mistreated his father when he was lying drunk naked in his tent. And Ham was the father of the black race. And she says you got to get out from under that curse. I don't know the answer. I don't know exactly what's going on. But it really does seem like even without racism, even without misbehavior on their own part, things just tend to not work out well for black people. And it's terrible to see this happen to Travis, because this is exactly the kind of thing that tore him up when it happened to other people he knew. He really wanted to see black people do well. It's awful to see him end up in the same boat as these people we used to pray for. But I shouldn't feel sorry for him, because now he's like a god. You know, if you die and go to heaven, once you're there, you're like a god. You're immortal. You can't be hurt. You can't be made afraid. You can't be worried. You can't be poor. You never lack. You swim in love. God created the universe for love. That's the purpose of the universe. He created it so he could have children around him and live in a place where the air is like I don't know how to put it. It's like a fog of love, and that's where he lives now. And I know that Travis has talked to my father. I'm sure he's talked to my father. I'm sure he's met my mother, who both have passed on. I'm sure he's met other people we know. So he's not the one with the problems now. It's terrible to see this happen to him, but the people down here are the ones who have to go on and live in this terrible place. And I keep asking God, what is the point, you know? What is the point? I'm so old, and look what happened. But the thing that I know is, if I continue in this life, the reason has to be love. It has to be for the purpose of helping other people to avoid hell, to help them to know God, so they're not alone. So for that, it's worth it. That's the only thing that can make it worth it to stay. And someday, and I probably won't be long, because society is deteriorating so quickly, it's going to reach a point where it's really not possible to reach enough people to justify the misery that Christians go through here, and God's going to pull us out. God will withdraw us, just like America taking the troops out of Saigon. You know, the Vietnamese couldn't be helped because they were so corrupt. Or it's like taking the people out of Somalia because they were so corrupt and couldn't be helped. You know, we're just going to leave. But until then, you know, I will try to continue and try to improve. And it won't be that long till I see Travis again. All the stuff that happens here, this all passes away. And whatever spirits that attacked Travis and succeeded in killing him, you know, it's no victory for them. They're going to burn in agony and humiliation forever. They will never see God again. And they will certainly never see Travis or me again once we're done. So I hope this is better than what I put up yesterday. I'm less emotional. I was really a mess yesterday, and maybe I didn't use the best judgment. But today I feel somewhat better, and I know I'll feel better and better as time passes. So maybe I'll think better and govern myself better. If you don't know God, I'll tell you, He really, truly loves you. Jesus visited me twice, and Jesus is around you, and He's near you. You can tell exactly where He is, and you can feel love pouring from Him to you. You can feel safety. You can feel His love the same way you feel the sun when you're outside on a hot day, except that it's more intense and it goes right through you. And any part of you that it touches feels peace and total safety. And that's what he wants to give you. I don't care what you've done. I don't care if you're a pedophile. I don't care if you're an axe murderer. I don't care if you're a former witch. I don't care if you've cursed God every day over and over in order to build yourself up. He will help you. God shops at the dump. He takes people that are broken and fixes them. There's no place where God can go and get perfect people and take them as His children. He died to help people like you, whatever your problems are, whatever you've done. He knew it, and He knows about it now. You don't have to tell God about your problems. I mean, you should, but He knows about them already. He knew about them before you were born. So you need to get to know God and swim in that love as much as you can. And when things don't go the way you expect them to, you just have to back up and reevaluate. So I hope this is helpful. And I guess next time I'll put something up about tools or firearms. By the way, I'm trying to remember what I said in this video. I don't know if I explained the whole situation with the firearms. Not long before Travis was shot, he sent me a few texts, and he was saying a friend of his was thinking about buying a gun, and he asked me for recommendations. And I didn't think anything about it. I said, well, for a beginner, I'd say, why not just get a Glock? I mean, they're simple, they're reliable, very common, parts are easy to get. If you don't like it, you can always get something later. It's a good place to start. I said, I guess I would get 45 caliber if I could, if I didn't mind the recoil. Things like that, just general things, and that was it. And I've been thinking maybe this shooting, maybe that was the young man who got the gun, who wanted the gun. Maybe he showed up at Travis's place to to show it to him, and maybe he ended up shooting Travis accidentally. And I guess some people would say, well, if that's true, how can you be making ammunition? How can you shoot all the time? And that's not reason. That's phobia. If you have a phobia about guns, you need to recognize it. If you're the kind of person who can't have a gun in a box in your house in a closet and sleep at night, there's something wrong. That's not reasonable or normal. Guns are not evil. If it weren't for guns, you wouldn't be free right now. Yes, that's something you need to think about. The freedom you have to complain about guns came from the use of guns. Being involved with guns, it's not something disgraceful. It's not like being involved in sex parties or pornography. It's not like you're going to an opium den when you go to a gun shop. It's a normal, wholesome, healthy part of life. It's a good skill to have, to be able to shoot. It's good to be able to protect people, to protect your family, protect yourself if you choose to. I mean, personally, I sort of feel that if I end up in that situation, it might be better just to let myself be killed to avoid sending an unsafe person to hell. But still, it's a good thing to be able to defend yourself. I mean, even if you decide not to defend yourself, if you decide to try to help out the unsafe criminal by allowing yourself to be sacrificed, what does it mean if you don't do that from a position of strength? If you're not armed, then who's going to believe it when people say that you chose this? No one. Jesus gave himself up from a position of strength. He told Peter to put away his sword, but he did tell him to carry the sword. So there's a lot of wonderful things about firearms ownership. Hunting is great. It makes you feel like a part of nature. There's a lot of mental challenges, a lot of skills and so forth involved in reloading and fixing guns, and all that stuff is pleasant to be involved in. And you may meet a lot of nice people, because an awful lot of Christians shoot, a tremendous number. I mean, real Christians. I don't mean Al Sharpton Christians. I don't mean Jeremiah Wright Christians. I don't mean Barack Obama Christians. I don't mean, Christians who think the Pope is right. The Pope has never met God. He knows very little about him. Well, I mean, if you're a spirit-led Christian, there's a good chance that you like to shoot. So you may meet a lot of nice people. And I will continue. Travis loved to shoot. He wanted to come up here and shoot on the farm. I put up these steel targets in my pasture that I showed him to him, and he was saying how much he wanted to come up and shoot. And he was a talented shot. He was very good. So I really look forward to that. I wish we could have done that together. But I had no part in what happened to him. I don't even know who shot him or what gun they used, or, I'm just speculating when I say maybe it was the person who was asking for advice. I don't have any idea, because the communication's so bad. And I don't think I'll ever find out. Well, that's it. Hope this is helpful. This time I really will sign off. So I hope God and you get together and you're lifted up above the mess of this world. I'm very sorry. I ran out of space on my card. I had to delete something. I was just saying, I hope this video is helpful to people. And I hope Travis has gotten together with my parents in heaven. I look forward to being with him before too long. I want to add one little short thing at the end of this. The other day, a couple of days ago, I had a lucid dream about Travis, and I'll explain it. I don't know, maybe someone who knew Travis might watch it and take some comfort from it. It was my last conversation with Travis, even though it wasn't a real life conversation, but it was comforting. So that's it. I'm really sorry. I thought the video was over. I forgot something. Night before last, I had a dream about Travis. I have lucid dreams all the time. It's a weird thing. I understand most people. It's really strange to hear about other people's dreams. I've heard that people dream in black and white. I've heard that most people dream in black and white. I can't even understand how that's possible. How your brain can turn color into black and white. That amazes me. I've never had a dream in black and white. And the other thing is, I understand most people don't have lucid dreams. I've had, so many of them. Some of them have been really annoying. The most annoying dream you can have is that you can't sleep. It's just unbearable. I've had this lucid dream where I was looking around the room, looking at my alarm clock, thinking, man, it's 5 in the morning and I'm still awake. I'm going to feel miserable tomorrow. And then I woke up. And boy, you feel so stupid when that happens. So I've had all sorts of weird lucid dreams. I had dreams where I could control reality. It was bad. Before I was a wonderful enlightened, totally righteous person like I am now, I used to conjure up women in my dreams. So you can imagine how that went. I mean, it's not like I took advantage of them because they were imaginary, but I did that. So I had a lucid dream, and I was in this house, and Travis had come to visit, and he looked great. He just glowed. He was so happy. He had this big grin on his face, and he had come for a visit. And I was so glad to see him. I told him how glad I was to see him. I told him how much I'd missed him, and I wanted to know what was happening. And I started asking him. I said, "What do you want to do? Do you want to stay here, or do you just want to go on?" And I don't mean stay here in the house. I mean stay here on Earth. Do you want to stay, or do you want to go? What's the answer? And he wouldn't acknowledge the question. He was just talking about other things with this big smile on his face. So I didn't get an answer from him. And I'm not even saying that it was a supernatural dream. I'm just saying it happened. It was really comforting to me. And I'll tell you why. My mother died from lung cancer, and my father and sister were looking after her. Well, my father was looking after her. My sister was just existing. And they were in Miami, and I was in Texas, trying to become a physicist. So I went to visit my mother in Miami, and I saw her in the hospital and so forth, and they were saying, well, she probably has a few months. So I went back to Texas, and then within a few days, I was called back. But during those few days, my mother changed rooms. They moved her to a different room. Well, my dad and my sister didn't bother to tell me what room she was in. So I was calling this number trying to get my mother, and I wasn't getting her. And this went like 3 days, I guess. And finally, my sister informed me that, well, two things I learned. One was that they had changed her room without telling me. And the other was that she was about to die. So I had to get right back on a plane and go right back to Miami. And I believe, as I recall, she died the night of the day that I arrived, she died. She was unconscious the whole time. And of course, I said things to her, but who knows if she heard anything. I didn't really get to communicate with her. I didn't get to have closure with her. So even though this dream about Travis was just a dream, I just felt so wonderful seeing him again. It felt so great to tell him what was going on and what my concerns were. So getting rid of these things that were visiting has been extremely positive, and the dream was very positive, and I'm very grateful for it. If you know somebody that might go soon, I strongly advise you try to work things out with them, because it makes a big difference. It made a huge difference with my dad. I'm not saying Travis is going to go, but I was very frustrated because I haven't been able to communicate with him. They intubated him at first, and then they had him sedated, and there's no phone in his room. He has no phone to text with, and there's no communication. So it just felt great to talk to him in the dream. I felt like we were face to face with each other. So I don't know how that relates to what I've been talking about, but I just wanted to put it out there. This time I really am going to turn off the camera and upload this thing. So hope it was of some benefit to you. Good night.